Hey, so today on the Now Concerning podcast, we have Pastor Stephen Webb. Pastor Stephen was one of the uh, formerly known as the expansion pastor at, I'm about to say Christ Fellowship. What in the world? Formerly known as the expansion pastor at Elevation Church, and he now serves as the executive pastor at City Church. He also gets to serve as my random text and call question guy whenever I have questions about life, about ministry. He's very straightforward, and I love that about him. I love that he's a straightforward guy. I like to try to be straightforward, so I try to keep straightforward guys in my life. And I love that. I love that you're straightforward. So, kind of tell us what you're doing now over at Victory City Church, and what are you up to nowadays?
So, yeah, we moved here maybe like Thanksgiving. We moved over Thanksgiving break from this kid's school, and we joined this. We were moving to Texas anyway, so we
Mm-hmm.
moved over here and to be among friends. We're originally from Texas, and then a former client said, "Hey, man, now that you're here, you should just come work here." So we
Wow.
basically came up with an arrangement a little while later that I would be his part-time executive pastor. So that's what I do officially.
Okay.
And then a few days a week, though, I'm just completely out of the office doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
So I serve at a church of like 650
Okay.
is a kind of a low average for us, and there's just
Yeah.
five and a half staff. I'm the half staff, and I do executive pastor stuff over here. So yeah.
Yeah. So talk about, Elevation, kind of world renowned church. Talk a
Hmm.
little bit about kind of what you got to do there. I love them, still love their music.
Hmm. Yeah,
I've been
yeah,
blasting
everybody
Seek
does.
First the Kingdom. Yeah, I've been blasting Seek First the Kingdom for days, man. Still, that song's been really on my heart.
Right.
Talk about kind of what you did there and what that looked like.
I spent a few years there, 10 years,
Okay. Yeah.
and
10 years, a long
uh,
time.
my final title. Well, excuse me. I guess not my final title, but my main title. Not that those are very sticky at Elevation. We change those pretty regularly, but I was the
Yeah.
expansion pastor. So ultimately, though, for like a decade, my job was either to start new things or fix
Hmm.
broken things, and give
Wow.
you a long list of examples. But ultimately, kind of the main job description, if you will, was starting new locations outside of Charlotte. So Elevation has 20 campuses, or had 20 campuses, and again, COVID, post COVID, they're in a different
Yeah.
spot, whatever. But my count is 20 campuses, and
Yeah.
then of course you add online to that, so that'd be, I guess, 21. And so
Holy
my role
cow.
was to start and instigate the 11 that are outside the city of Charlotte, from Toronto to Orlando and lots of places in between.
Holy
So my
cow.
job was to kind of do a lot of that. Now, of course, there's a team of us, not necessarily
Yeah.
an expansion team, but everybody is, and this at any size church, I think, but even at big
Mhm.
churches, everybody's doing two or three different jobs. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
us that put our hands on it, but that was my primary function for pretty much the whole time, was to fix or build things. So yeah,
Yeah. I love that terminology, fix or build things. I
yeah,
think I want to start, I want to dive more into that, but I want to start first asking you. I know you didn't just wake up overnight as expansion pastor of Elevation Church. How did you get there? Like, what's your testimony? How did you come to know God? How did you come to know Jesus as your Lord and Savior?
well, I was born and raised in a music minister's house in the Southern Baptist Church. My
Oh
dad was a
wow,
music
yeah,
minister, so my mom was the piano player, my dad was the worship leader. You just didn't call them worship leaders back then; they were just
yeah.
music ministers. And um, and uh, and then I have a brother who's also in ministry now, and so it's just the four of us in our family. And I would say that they're all three great musicians. I picked up a little bit in the DNA, but they're the ones that are
Yeah.
like legit lifelong musicians, like prodigy level musicians. So I grew up in that family, though, and then so naturally was at every vacation Bible school and Sunday school and all those kind of things. And ultimately, it just kind of got on me, like residue of like, hey, you're at
Yeah.
church, you should believe all this stuff. And so, but I wouldn't say it was flippant though either when I say that. But all of that to say, I consciously gave my life to Christ at 8 years old at a church
Mm.
in Grand Prairie, Texas, where my parents were serving for about a decade. So I did that. I got baptized, I think a few weeks later. It was in September of 87. Kind of dates me a little bit. I'm 42. so,
Yeah.
so I got baptized then and there. And then, as you've heard the similar version of some story like this from a lot of people, but, over the next, 10, 15, 20 years, you kind of make that your own. You
Mm,
start to figure out what does it mean to follow Jesus versus believe in Jesus and that kind of stuff. And so
yeah,
that was ultimately my journey. I used to always kind of explain a little bit, like in the early days of youth ministry, of like when I was in the youth ministry at a church, like I don't have one of those like junkie to Jesus testimonies. I don't know what I'm supposed
yeah,
to say. It's not like I was
yeah,
on crack and Jesus saved me. And, I had a
yeah,
very, I don't know, boring, typical sort of like churchy story. So, but
yeah,
I don't have a problem with that now. But that
yeah,
was that was definitely my complaint, early on. So
yeah.
anyway, that's definitely my story, and it's been pretty much consistent the whole way through. But hey, it's funny. I know this isn't the topic of our conversation today,
No,
but I
go
will just
ahead.
tag on by saying now that I'm a parent, both of my kids have accepted Jesus into their heart as well,
Come
and
on,
I see them
I
in that
love
like
that.
infant stage of like, what does this mean, and how do I do this or whatever
Yeah,
when it comes to their faith. And so it's funny how like when it's you, or in this case me, going through just regular life, thinking like, oh, I don't have that story. Am I really saved then if I didn't do
yeah,
some sort of like weird crackhead sort of a life or whatever?
yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. But then now I'm like, well, no, no, no. I want my kids to know Jesus very early and just stay in
Oh
it. And
man,
a boring testimony is not a problem because every testimony, as long as it's personal, is powerful. So I'm not worried about that
yeah,
part now that I'm on that side of it. So it's funny to see kind of both ends of it.
yeah. I mean, let's go there. I have, I grew up in a rough town in Riviera Beach and partly Martin County, and my cousins were, as I've told people, and into different things, selling drugs in gangs. The list goes on. I've seen
Yeah.
people shot at. I have one of those weird radical came down
Yeah.
to the altar in
Yeah.
a Pentecostal church.
Yeah,
Um,
baby.
and looking back on it now, I tell my wife all the time, I don't want my son or daughter to have to go through what I went through. So
Right.
if they can, and I tell my wife all the time, I just see our kids coming home one day like, hey, we want to start a Bible study with our friends, because that's
Right.
where my heart is.
Yeah.
I
Right.
would love nothing more than my kids to grow up and like never have to know what that
Yeah.
pain is and never
Oh,
have to
sure.
know what I still have to talk to my wife about that stuff. I still have
Right.
to process. Thank God he saves us, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe everything. There's moments in the Bible where things are taken away right at once, right? You never hear
Yep.
about it again. It's healed.
Yep.
But I believe there's things that God is just slowly, continually working in us that
Mm-hmm.
it reminds us almost where we came from. How do you do that? Like, how are you processing that as a parent when you're saying, this is my kid, this will be my kid's testimony? Like they
Um.
don't have this extreme story, but that's okay.
Yeah. I mean. Yeah. I mean. I don't know if I process it any certain way. I just want them
Yeah.
to live on purpose. Like make conscious decisions about whatever they do every day of their life. And
Yeah.
that's not just, it's not like you have regular life and your kind of faith journey. It's all
Mhm.
one thing. I think.
Yeah.
So I just want them to go be consistent. I want them to be authentic. I want them to be themselves. And then hopefully
Yeah.
that also means, of course, because again, they're integrated, that they're chasing after, God's heart, trying to understand, his voice and discern his voice in the silence,
Mhm.
but also his movement in the chaos. And
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that way. Again, like you said, I don't, or like we've talked about, I don't think it has to be this big, like extreme transformation. Those are
Mhm.
great and they do happen. And like you referred to your story, that's great, but it's not
Yeah.
required. And my kids
No,
don't
not at
perceive
all.
that now. My kids don't perceive that now. They don't care. But there will come a time they're in a youth group or something. They'll hear like, oh, wait a second, that's a cool story. Is mine boring? Because I never wanted to share
Yeah.
my story because it's boring. But at the end of the day, I feel like there are probably more boring lives and testimonies than
Mhm.
not.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that either is more important than another. It just means that everything is relevant. Like again, your
Yeah.
personal story, whatever it is, can be powerful to somebody. So
Yeah.
I just want them to kind of get that in their mind and just go out and live their story rather than try to like manufacture something that's sticky or
Yeah.
postable or whatever.
Yeah. And I tell people, I remember Amber and I going to school with a young lady who she looked at my wife and said something very similar, like, "Oh man, I wish I had your testimony." And I've had people say that to me. Man, I wish I. And I'm like, no, you don't.
Right.
You don't know what it's like to watch that. You
Yeah.
don't know what it's like to be ducking behind cars and,
Yeah.
and feeling yourself, and you don't want that. I
No, I
had
don't
to go to
know.
therapy for that stuff. You
Sure.
don't want
Sure.
that. Why would you want that? because it sounds cool. I'm like,
Right.
dude, like, just you have to be comfortable in your own skin. With if I could take your testimony and you have mine, I
Right.
would.
We'll do that.
Dude, I still have dreams about this stuff. You know,
Right. That's
literally,
great.
no lie. This morning, I had a dream and I punched the wall in my sleep. And my wife grabbed me and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm just like, I have to still process this stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
like, it doesn't, because it's so traumatic, it doesn't leave you, you
Right.
know? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you not want to, hey, I grew up in church too. I just did
Yeah.
I made dumb decisions. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm like,
Yeah.
why would you want to take that? Like his grace is still the same for you as it is for me. Thank God that you
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to go through what I went through.
Yeah.
And you talk a little bit, you referred to it earlier, you at your job, you took broken things or you fixed broken things and you kind of just felt out where different things were moving. How did you get into that? Or what was kind of your day to day and like taking something broken, fixing it?
Like in the job, or like how did
Yeah.
I just ultimately get that skill or whatever?
Yeah. How'd you develop that skill of taking something?
And I don't know a good answer for that. I've just
Mm.
always been curious and was the guy that tinkered on stuff. And I'm a I would say hyperlogical person. It's not,
Oh, amen.
I don't do the like, hey, let's just believe this because we're supposed to believe it. I
Yeah.
don't do the because I said so thing. I don't parent that way. And so
Yeah.
therefore I never wanted to do that either growing up. It's like that doesn't make any sense. So I've never said that to my kids because I said so.
Wow.
So I'm just hyperlogical, and like if there's a reason, great. If there's not, then let's just move on. So I just took that into any job. It wasn't just ministry jobs, but anyway, somehow that came out and became I don't know, I guess a reputation of some sort of elevation.
Yeah.
And to the credit of our senior leader, not Pastor Stephen Furtick, but our executive pastor, he gave me a job because one day he said, because I'd been told I wasn't going to get a job. I've been told that by a lot of people. It's actually a really funny story that we won't talk about here for now. We'll save time. But ultimately, his name is Chunks. Other people would know
Oh
his name.
yeah, yeah.
He said, but these people think I shouldn't hire you, but I can't argue with results. And that's all I
Mm.
needed. I'll never forget that quote. I probably ought to get a tattoo, like can't argue with the results.
Wow. No,
um,
that is.
but it just was like, it's just something I started to do. And because again, hyperlogical, I'm going to make something work if it can work, or
Yeah.
if it should work. So then that's it. Growing up in ministry, or at least in again a family that does that, meaning you're with people all the time, so you kind of pick up on how to engage with people.
Mm.
Um, so if you go to public school and your mom might work as a secretary somewhere and your dad works in manufacturing somewhere, generally you're not going to be around as many people in a serving sort of capacity or expression
Yeah.
that somebody born and raised in ministry would. Again, it's not bad or good. It's not either or. I'm just pointing out that I grew up around people, lots of people,
Yeah.
and engaging and serving them and finding out how to leverage, not manipulate, but leverage people's gifts to,
Mm.
come together and let's all do something great together. So then putting that hyperlogical uh, lean, bend, whatever on top of serving with people, mobilizing people, leveraging people's gifts, all that just lent itself to, building and fixing things as it came to ministry. Now, fixing, let's just point out real quick.
Yeah.
Uh, I think I'm a relatively handy dude and can hang pictures and, fix,
Yeah.
houses and things. That's not what we're talking about though. It's like we had a campus elevation that was just broken, man. Bad
Yeah.
culture, bad staff. The whole thing was just like off plateaued, actually declining. And so that was,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to go over there and just be a part of that team and kind of like renovate and fix. And so it's that kind
Wow.
of thing. When I say about fixing,
So
just
what are your
kind of,
steps kind of through that? What are your steps when
yeah.
someone's saying, "Hey, you're going to go pick up that culture"? What is, like, even in a business sense or in a church sense, how are you going over and doing that? What was your steps?
Yeah. So for me, and these aren't, I'm not saying they're universal for everybody, but
Mhm.
for me,
Yeah.
first of all, man, I just want to know if I'm taking inventory. Or your psychologist or your counselors will tell you, hey, listen first, and that's what I would do a lot of.
Mm.
I do like to talk. I will use a lot of words if you get me on the topic that I would perceive myself to be an expert on or whatever. But
Yeah.
generally, I'm a pretty quiet guy. Anybody who
Mm.
knows me knows I'll be pretty chill in a meeting for a while, and then there's a shot that's going to come at you at some point when we get to like solution or direction or decision mode. So all that
Mhm.
to say, I go into any of those opportunities and just evaluate. I'm looking around, head on a swivel. Let's take inventory. Who do we have? What do they have to work with? What's their background? What's their experience? What's the, like, from a church standpoint or a campus standpoint at a church? Like, okay, what are our vital signs, our metrics? Who are our key leaders? What are the problems? Can we define them, or is it just vibe? Let's just go to
Mhm.
bad vibe. You're like, I hate that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to articulate and identify very clearly what is the inventory? What do we have to work with? Kind of take stock, situation. And that takes a while. I'm pretty good at it, but it's not like
Mhm.
you just go in and have a note and write it down and we're just boom, let's go and create a strategy. So I'm going to take a little bit of time doing that, and then I'm going to start going first of all to people. Okay, I heard
Yeah.
you're one of the key leaders, or I heard you're great, or hey, Lemon, I just see you doing a lot. Whatever it is, I'm going to go in there with a compliment like that first, and be like, hey,
Yeah.
tell me what you see, and then I'm going to immediately, literally immediately, second step is to go in and start hearing through the eyes of people, which then mobilizes their gifts, and it automatically gives them a voice. And then,
Yeah.
so it's never my idea. I'm just the guy that kind of gets in subversively and says, hey, we should do this. And they're like, hey, we should do this. I'm like, aha, yeah, you came up with that.
Yeah.
And then that transfers ownership. So it's not me delegating a task. I'm actually giving them ownership. And then we all together get better at it. So
Yeah.
inventory, and then I'm mobilizing through people very, very quickly. And then everybody else together is smarter than me alone, or an
Yeah.
individual alone, right?
Yeah.
So I'm making this sound really simple, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, it snowballs pretty quick after that.
Yeah. And
and
you made a
I've seen that.
comment. Yeah, and you made a comment just now that I want to piggyback off of. You said um that you're always including people and building people up. And I read one of Amber and I, especially around the time, I don't know if you probably do remember this, you were the one that posted it, when the first dance came out with
Oh yeah,
Michael
dude.
Jordan. And you were
Yes,
posting
great show.
a lot of good
Great
stuff.
show.
Amber and I, we
Yep.
were trapped in the house 2020. We would read through in the bed, we'd read through a lot of your stuff. One post you made, I saw, I don't know how far back it was. You were talking about how Jesus was inclusive of bringing people along. How
Yep.
did you, or how do you walk through that from, again, a business standpoint or a church standpoint of, like, there's a, so we were, I'll reference it with this. I was in a recording before, a pastor brought up there is a discipling problem in the church, right? A
Mhm.
huge discipling problem. Like,
Sure.
I don't know if we all fully, even myself, and that's why I'm asking you, know how to bring other people along or what that looks like. You are great at this as far as building churches and consulting. How are you doing that? Kind of what some steps, what did you see Jesus model? I know you wrote some things down in your post. You want to kind of go back through
Yeah.
that?
Well, I don't exactly remember that post. I probably
Yeah.
just said something and got lucky that it sounded smart. But I think what I do, and I do try to just copy Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I'll just say it. I'll say the provocative thing. I think it's actually a lot more simple than we give it credit for, and I actually
Mm,
find it to be relatively easy.
yeah.
Um, I think by even calling it discipling is what's hard. That's a long word,
Yeah.
because Jesus didn't call them the disciples either. He called them by name. So we've already
Yeah.
given somebody a title. So we've already taken individual humans and categorized them as they,
Wow.
right? Like, let's just be real provocative.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
what the disciples did. Like, what if you said
Yeah.
that, right? That's what we say. Well, what if I just let me just say, hey, well, what if black people? Like,
Yeah.
that sounds weird, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a hot button issue right now. But like,
Yeah.
what if gay people? You
Yeah.
can't really say that. You know what I mean? It just doesn't
Yeah.
hit. So first of all, I didn't say anything negative or divisive, but I just said
Yeah.
something in a way that took the humanity out of it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I think by even naming it, man, it makes it so hard, man. We talk about discipleship courses and classes, and we're going to build disciples, and it's like, I never found Jesus doing that or saying that. I saw we're
Mm,
categorizing on the back end what he did,
mm,
but I don't think Jesus went in and be like, you know what? Here's the deal, man. We're going to do a discipleship class. We're going to call it Growth Track. We'll do 6 weeks. 2 to 4. Bring your notebook, take some
yeah.
notes. He never once did that, and so here's why I think it's very simple. He freaking opened up his life and said, "Let's go walk around." That's all he
Mm,
did. That is all he did. Point me to scripture where he sat down and taught classes about it, made them check a list, join a membership class before they can go serve, get baptized,
wow.
sign the covenant before you can do it. Dude, those people were barely saved after 3 years with Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, they're just giants in the faith. Really? Because there was, I think, I might be
Yeah.
wrong on my
Oh
history here, but there
gosh.
was only one at the foot of the cross. So they were giants in the faith, but only one of them showed up at the cross.
Oh my
Again, I'm
gosh.
assuming my math is correct.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, I
Yeah.
just think there's a few thousand years in between that where the legend has grown to an extent where we
Oh
think it's some
boy.
big thing. And all Jesus did was like, hey, dude, I was walking around, I saw you fishing. That looks pretty cool, but let's go like hang out together for a couple of years. That's what he
Yeah.
said. Walk me through where I'm saying something that's incorrect.
Yeah. No.
I think it's that simple. So the way I do it is I actually, again, I'm hyperlogical, man. And
Hmm.
Jesus is like, let's go roam around the countryside for a while. I'll do some magic tricks. It'll be really cool. We'll do some neat things at a wedding. And then hopefully y'all will pick up on it. And then he said, and y'all will do even more, like y'all will do cooler things than this. That's what he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So, but we're overthinking it like, well, but Jesus, he's fully God. So there, yeah, but he's also fully man. So, but he also
Yeah.
said, you'll do more than this. And so we try to like separate, well, yeah, but he's Jesus. Well, then stop saying, what would Jesus do then? So like, we're always trying to make
Yeah.
things difficult. And all he did was go grab a couple of dudes, didn't even bat 1,000, by the way, because we have a whole Judas issue. Well, that was predestination. Oh my gosh, there you go making it hard again. Fine. But it's
Oh
not
my gosh. Yeah.
but the whole predestination thing of Judas or God knew or but that's fine. But then that's a wholesale excuse about why you should never have to go hang out with anybody because God knew. Well, then I guess we shouldn't do anything because God knew. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like we make it really hard. So
Wow.
I'm just saying,
Wow.
just go
Wow.
grab somebody that you like to hang out with. That's literally the first thing. I was telling this to a crew a couple weeks ago. Like, what's the first step? And we're trying to hire somebody here, not a
Mhm.
person, just we have an open
Yeah.
staffing budget line item. We don't have a role because I don't hire roles. I hire good people. And
Mm.
my first thing I told the staff, the team was like, hey, just the first category is, do you like them? Well, I don't like them. They're complete morons,
Wow.
but man, they really know kids ministry or something. I don't buy that. And I think Jesus, I mean, I know it doesn't say this point blank, but I just think that's part of his equation too. He's like, man, let's just go hang out. You look like somebody to hang out with. Let's go, because the other guys, the Pharisees, dude, they just talk, they make things too hard and they dress in all that clothing that's just going to be weird. I don't have time for that. I think he went around and was like, hey, man, you look like you're from South Florida. You look like you wear flip flops at the beach. Let's just go hang out. I
Yeah.
literally think that's part of the equation. So that's what I do. And then when you do that, it just kind of comes off of you. You share your life with other people, they pick up on it. And later on, there's an off ramp. Maybe somebody's like, hey, listen, I don't really want to do this. I don't really like
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, that's what Judas chose.
Which
Apparently,
people did.
that's what the rich young ruler chose.
Mhm.
That's what a bunch of other people chose when he's like, I ain't got a place to lay my head. Fine, it's an off ramp. Again, we have the
Mhm.
legend of the 12 or the 11, and then you have the substitute. We have that legend, but I think there's a lot of other people that came and went, came and went. He's like, hey, it's fine, man. This is what we're doing. I'm on mission. I'm inviting you to be a part of it, but I'm not slowing down to build disciples. And that's a provocative statement right there that I'm sure somebody in the seminary wants to make fun of me for and be mad at me about. But listen, I don't think Jesus came to make disciples. I thought Jesus came for essentially, I'm going to use big words here, substitutionary atonement for the rest of us.
Mm.
And oh,
Yeah.
by the way, while I'm here wandering around the countryside, I'll make disciples. But I don't think it was primary function.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we overlooked that it was his primary function because it says go and make disciples. I know that. I know that. I just don't think it's this all or none. Go and make
Yeah.
disciples. So therefore, move your whole, like way of doing life outside of logical and normal into this like
Yeah.
prescriptive school class
Yeah.
sort of a thing. So anyway, that's all I do, man. I just invite people
No.
into my life. I take people with me everywhere. If people want to drive with me across the town, if people want to fly with me somewhere, I do that. If people want to come over to the house and do that. If you want to ask me on a podcast, like, hey, what do you think about this? I'm going to tell you what I think.
Yeah.
And you don't like it, that's okay. But I think a lot of times we're trying to qualify people first.
Mm.
That's what it is. Hey, listen, you can't come on staff if you don't. You can't be a member of our church if you don't blank, 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 blank. You can't be a leader or a team member if you don't go through this class or the steps. And I get the logic of them. I'm not opposed to any sort of system or structure necessarily, like,
Yeah.
or not holistically. I'm not opposed to structure, but sometimes it's real clear that we're just trying to make hoops for people to jump through because it makes us feel better and safer. Because now we can
Wow.
put an individual back into a class. We can just call them they and them and disciples. Remember, black people and gay people. It's just
Yeah.
them. It's
Yeah.
not like a human because we don't want to do that because another thing you're gonna hear at conferences is scalability and all that. And I get it. I worked at a
Yeah.
massive church, bro. I built campuses on a text message, man. Literally, like I get scalability and
Yeah.
systems. I'm
Yeah.
as big a fan of those as you've seen, but not at the expense of a one-on-one human interaction with somebody at Starbucks for a minute.
Yeah.
And I don't think people want to do that. I think it's a hard thing to want to bring people inside and be patient. And the last but not least, I'll just say, I think another hard thing is people just don't want to believe the best about somebody else
Wow.
because then you can be let down. And then you're going to be wrong. Man, I really thought Kenneth was somebody, but he wasn't. And now somebody's like, yes, well, remember that one time you believed in Kenneth, but he turned out to be an idiot? Like somebody
Yeah.
will say that. And then you'll go, oh, well, I guess you're right. I'm not good at picking people. So therefore, I'm just not going to go make disciples at all because the last one I tried didn't work out. Now, play that logic out if Jesus said that about Judas. Play that logic out if Jesus said that at the cross, only one of them showed up. You know?
Yeah.
Like what if when he's talking to Peter and he's forgiving Peter basically with the whole repetition of like, go feed my sheep, go feed my sheep, go feed my sheep. Like what if he played that logic out that we do with discipleship? Yeah, remember, you're not good at picking people because Ken turned out to be a nobody.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you just have to have patience in this deep core belief that people do matter and there's a lot of great things in them. It's not up to you to make it the thing.
Yeah.
It's not up to you to take credit or blame for where they end up. But I do think it's up to you to say things that could activate what's in them.
Wow.
So I'm on a rant, bro. You got me all triggered
No,
here, but
you're good. You're good. Keep it going.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
And I just really think it's that simple, man.
Yeah.
I just really do.
Yeah. I think
go
ahead. I think the problem is we prioritize other things over just the simple. I remember working on a project that I actually called you for, if you remember that, just jumping on a meeting.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting in my office and playing some worship music, and I just had just like a small worship session, just me and God and praying. And I remember God just telling me, like, Kenneth, just make it simple. Why are you trying to reinvent the wheel? Make it simple. Right. And so much of that is because I remember I've been reading Francis Chan's Letters to the Church. And oh my gosh, I mean, I've been like, holy cow. Well, then what does a successful church look like? You know, if we're not doing all this stuff. And he's saying the problem we get so tired and different things is because essentially we try to reinvent the wheel, you know, instead of just like the simple care of first self-care, you know, and then care for others. And then all the other stuff happens just organically rather than trying to manufacture it. Because when we manufacture it at a certain level, we have to maintain that level. Right. You know, we put this pressure on ourselves to maintain that level of big and ginormous and event. And we're tired all the time. We're like, well, why am I tired all the time? Because we're trying to, you know, and I was reading that with Francis Chan and it hit me just like, wow, I've become so ingrained in like, this is how church has to look. This is how this has to look. You're a guy planting churches. Let's say I want to go start a church tomorrow. What's your first advice words to me?
Oh yeah, I'm telling you no. I don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't be it. I tell them all that. I told church planners that. Nobody told me that. And I was like, well, y'all should have told me that. I told anybody, so our system, I think is a little different than Christ Fellowships back in the day, but Elevation back in the day, it was like somebody would call and be like, hey, we want Elevation in our town. You know, they'd say something like that. And my first response literally all the time, bro, it's well documented, is nah. Wait, I thought you were trying to reach people.
Yeah.
Wait, you said like the website says, and you can, and I saw that those people in Roanoke, Virginia were doing it. I was like, nah, you shouldn't do it. Yeah. And I just think that's a good strategy. Is like, it's a good evaluator. If they go, oh, okay, you're right. Well, then boom, I found a guy with zero grit and zero conviction, you know? And then if they go, wait, no, I'm going to do it anyway. Now I found somebody with grit and conviction and drive, and I'll harness that. So I got to draw a line in the sand because I got to know where they stand. And so my first response is always no, because the second question from every church planner is, cool, will you pay for it? So in some way, hey, join my team. Hey, pass it around. Hey, man, can I come preach at your church? Hey, can I pitch something? Hey, look over this prospectus. I get it. I did all those things. I understand it. I'm not opposed to it. Yeah. But that's always going to be their second question, something about resource, help, whatever. And then no, just, you know, go build something and prove it first, and then we'll pay for it on the back end. Yeah. And so my first response, like, I know it's kind of silly, but it's always no. No, and you draw a line in the sand, you find out where people stand. Again, I think Jesus did that plenty of times. And then once you know where they stand, it doesn't mean they can't cross later. It doesn't mean they can't value later. And again, just look at Jesus before cross, after the cross. You know, like the guys came back around. He's like, cool, now we can get something done because I know where you stand.
Yeah.
So
that's right. I mean, even with the man who said, hey, let me go bury my family member first. And Jesus is like, now, do I think Jesus was just cruel and trying to be whatever? No, he cried when Lazarus died. You know, he felt, but I think it was that thing of, like you saying, draw the line in the sand, because I think he essentially always knows where our hearts are, and trying to measure where we are. I don't think
Right.
he asked questions or said things just cause. I think he
No.
asked questions to see, like, are you gonna say it? Do you really believe that? You
Mm-hmm.
know? And he's like, well, let me go back and bury my family first. And
Yep.
Jesus is like, well, let the dead bury the dead.
Yep.
Wanting to see where was this guy at? Where was he
Yeah.
truly at? Because
Yep.
essentially, you can say, looking at that story, he's just doing it just because he may not essentially want. It seems like a good excuse, really. Like, come
Yeah.
on, nobody, come on, Jesus, just give me a chance to bury my family member, you know? And it's like
That's right.
he wasn't
That's
being
right.
cruel. It was just like he almost was using so great of an excuse to
Mm-hmm.
not see where Jesus was at, but Jesus
That's
was
right.
trying to see where he was at and just being
Right.
like, no, like I think you're using that from Jesus's response. I think he's essentially saying, like, I think you're trying to use that as an excuse to not follow me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
Everybody's
called
looking
you.
for a quick out. Yeah.
Yeah,
And you get that a lot from church planners or any job for that matter. It's like, well, that's
yeah.
kind of hard. So, or, he said I shouldn't. So therefore, I guess I shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But the opposite is true too, right? You got, well, that
Yeah,
guy over there, he leads at a big church. So therefore, he told me I should. So maybe I'll go
yeah,
start a church. Like, whoa, hang on a second. I don't know that any of those is just like, it's not like a one-time definitive thing. So
yeah,
so yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. But
yeah,
ultimately, I'm just trying to find out like what people have in them. I'm not saying it's yes or no. I'm not like the universal expert on how to start a church, and I don't think there
yeah.
is such a thing, by the way.
Wow.
Big church, good church, small church, bad church. Like no, I don't think there is such thing as like, are you doing what you're called to do? Are you maximizing?
Mhm.
Are you doing all you can with all that you have? Those are bigger questions than is it
Yeah.
good or is it bad or should I not? And so I'm just looking for that first. And once you know where that is, you kind of have to get to rock bottom, so to speak. Like once you know like where
Mm-hmm.
foundation or bedrock is, great. Now we can build with that.
Yeah.
And that's not a problem. So my first day, I'm just going back to your original question. My first step is no, and then of course we find the line in the sand kind of thing. But the other thing that I'm going to do is, or I look for, is I want people to fight, man. And that's
Yeah.
going to come out in words. I want you to like argue with me about why you want to do it, why you're good at it, what God's called you to do, why you think it's going to be successful. I want you to tell me your fears. And I'm not asking those questions in like a bullet pointed way, but I am wanting to find that. I want people to process out loud. I don't want them to go in a closet somewhere or a blog or Starbucks and write things down and then bring me this like full 17-page business plan about how the church is going to work. Because I would suggest probably every single time they've done that, that didn't work.
Yeah.
I want them to process out loud, which I know that sounds funny. And again, that goes back to I have a
No.
certain patience and belief in people that others don't. Other people want
Yeah.
to be pitched like a venture capitalist. I don't. I want to work with you and process with you. And so I'm looking for that, and I can hear that like that fight, that grit, that has a soundtrack to it. It has a
Yeah.
sound. So I'm evaluating that. All the other stuff's easy, bro. How you pay for it, great. I don't need you to tell me. I don't need somebody to go to a preaching class. I know that sounds really crazy. I know that
Mm-hmm.
sounds nuts. Man, you got to go to a preaching class and you need to go to an assessment. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I think an assessment these days is mainly just an industry to make money. It's not necessarily super
Mm,
qualified. I can point
yeah.
to a lot of failures who were assessed, and I can point
Yeah.
to a lot of real famous name preachers who've crapped out with the affairs, like one per week over the last 8 or 9 weeks
Yeah.
in this country, by the way, and they were on the assessment panel. So it's not like an end all be all. If you're assessed, you will do blank. So I'm
Yeah.
eliminating all that. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just not saying that's the solution. I'm looking for
Mm-hmm.
the gritty internal stuff, and it's usually going to hurt when I'm doing some sort of evaluation.
Yeah.
So because I just want to know where it's at.
Yeah. What have you seen from like a positive church plant or a negative one per se? What have you kind of do you have a gauge? Is that a good question? Do you have a gauge of,
Of what's good
a
or what's bad.
positive, yeah, of like, yeah, this went very successful, or we could have done a couple things different on that one.
Well, so that's a good question. I equate that to the culture conversation. You guys
Yeah.
have good culture. The only people that can define if a culture is good is the person that's intending it to be something.
Oh,
So, like you
yeah.
would say, man, like so we'll just use our examples of our big churches,
Yeah.
Well, Elevation has such a good culture, and people would say that
Yeah.
all the time. They'd fly in from literally all around the world,
Yeah.
and they would come say you have a good culture. And I'm like, well, what is a good culture? You're like, you guys are just so fun and you like really work
Yeah.
hard. I'm like, oh, is that what so that's a good culture? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
is if we intend it to be that, but intention is
Mhm.
the only way you can determine if it's good or bad is do you know what was intended to be in the first place? Because if our intention is to be lazy and you say y'all really work hard, it's like, well, frick, man, they think we work hard. Dang it, our intention is to be lazy culture, or vice
Yeah.
versa. Y'all make it look easy. Well, frick, we actually are working really hard. You know what I mean? So you don't get to say that. So same with church plants. You know, some people, a lot of people are going to evaluate a church plant or a church in general, good or bad, based on size or activity, or
Yeah.
they'll throw out the word excellence, which they seem to have a definition for, you know, because it's a moving target.
Yeah.
And but those are all going to be comparison things. And I think there's parts of all of those that are fine, but as a whole,
Yeah.
man, good or bad is only going to be determined by the purity of what it's supposed to be, like the pure connection or comparison to potential, not to something else.
Yeah.
So size is always a comparison to something else. Like, how do you know if it's a big church or a small church? Like, so we just
Yeah.
got done with Easter, right? And everybody's posting all their numbers. Oh my gosh, we had 1,200 people. Oh my gosh, we had 30,000
Yeah.
people. Oh my gosh, we baptized 86 people. Oh my gosh, we had
Yeah.
46 salvations. But every one of those numbers is relative. Is that a lot? Is it not?
Yeah.
You know,
True.
like, as I went to a church that baptized 2,000 people in a weekend, you
Yeah.
know? So, but then also, you know, have been to campuses where they would baptize 40% of their church in a
Yeah.
weekend, you know, but then you can't replicate that every week probably. So is that good? Is it bad? You know, it's like, it's all a comparisons
Yeah.
too. The numbers are irrelevant. So I would apply that same sort of logic to, um, you know, what a good or bad church plant is, or church in general.
How do we get away from the business aspect of church? How do we get away from, like, is there a way to get away from that?
Well, what's the business aspect?
The numbers, the is that stuff important in
So
church?
I'm a big fan of all the metrics. I really am.
Okay.
I don't think that's the problem. I think the motivation is the problem. So if you're
Mm,
motivated by the numbers, that's a problem. But if you're or if the numbers are just a measurement, I don't think that's a problem.
yeah.
So, you know, growth is always a fun one. Like, oh man, they're growing really fast. They're the fastest growing church. They're on the fastest growing church list because Outreach
Yeah.
Magazine says that's a thing. We should put a magazine out. Everybody reads it. They're like, oh my gosh, we made the list, and they put that on social media. You know what else grows fast? Tumors.
Ooh.
So wait, so is fast growth a thing, or you mean fast growth in church? You know
Yeah.
what's you know where Outreach Magazine and other magazines don't make lists of? The back door of how many people are leaving at that church either.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, their online ministry is huge. There's like 47 billion people watching that, you know, blank church online. Something okay. But do you know how many people stopped watching last week because they got tired of just consuming content rather than actually be a part of community or
Wow.
something? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's not
Yeah.
complete. It's not consistent.
Yeah.
So I don't think business is the quote business side is a bad thing. I just don't think it gets the drive. And I think
Yeah.
again that goes back to comparison. So a lot of people are trying to build a business strategy to what they do. And so that's why, again, they're trying to make things scalable and systematic. That's what we're back to Black people and gay people and those
Yeah.
people and the Democrat people and the Republican people, and all people, rather than a
Yeah.
person, rather than a
Yeah.
direction. It's just like, hey, let's just put it into a bucket and then mail it over there and call it a campus and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's just not how it works. So,
Yeah.
so again, I don't think it's the enemy. I don't think it's the enemy at all. You kind of have to know. I think Craig Rochelle or probably 100 pastors say something similar, but the idea of if you can't measure it, you can't move it, you can't make it better, you can't improve it. That
Yeah.
kind of mindset,
Yeah.
that kind of idea. I don't know
Yeah.
what the exact quote is, but it's that idea. I think measurements are important. I don't think
Yeah.
that's bad,
Yeah.
but it just can't drive.
Yeah.
So
How do we lay a foundation, kind of just wrapping up with you here?
yeah.
How do we lay a foundation of ministry and what we measure as success? Is that internal? Is that biblical? How would you move forward in that? As someone who helps people build church and consult, and they say, hey, measurements, are we successful? Whatever. Like, is that how do you go about that, or how do you define that?
Well, again, overly simple here, and it
Yeah.
takes some effort to really live it out. But are you doing all you can with all that you have?
Wow.
That's the definition of excellence.
Yeah.
Excellence isn't based on a budget number. It's not based on a certain style. It's not a vibe. I'm tired of
Wow.
excellence and vibe being compared to be the same thing. I'm so tired of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Energy, excitement. Wow, I just feel the energy in the room today, man. We're just doing things with excellence, man. No, you can
Yeah.
be really excited about absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So you can go to raves, you can go to parties, you can go to bars, and there's a lot of good energy and vibe there. But I don't know if that's like an excellent way to go about your life at 2 a.m. So is doing all you can with all that you have,
Yeah.
right? Are you sandbagging because you're thinking for this later? Are we not spending budget money on like actual life change here or celebration of things here or there because we're sandbagging for when we get to do the conference where everybody's going to know our name? They're going to come to our church conference. We're going to know everything. Like, because conferences, that's what it is. It's like, hey, look how awesome we are. I go to every conference. I love them all. They're fine. I'm a big fan of Christ Fellowship Conference, for example. Like, conference by themselves are not bad. The point is, some people, especially small churches with no budget, are going to allocate sandbag essentially and take
Mhm.
resource over here so
Yeah.
that they look like there's something, but they can only afford it and do it from a time, money, whatever standpoint. because they're sandbagging over here. They're not using all they can to do all, or they're not using all they have to do all that they can. So that's just the definition of excellence for me. And I just don't know. I don't know why more people can't do that, other than the fact that comparison is essentially that enemy, as we're trying
Yeah.
to be somebody else. So
Yeah. And I know in just kind of wrapping up here in Ecclesiastes 9 and 10, it says, whatever, I used to quote this a lot, especially when I was in the military. It's just whatever your hands find to do in this world, do it with all your might.
yeah, right.
And I still do that, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you for bringing that up, because I think that serves as a comfort to me. And even not working inside the church at this moment, it serves as a comfort to me to go back to that foundational, like whatever my hands are doing, do it
Hmm.
with all my might,
Yeah.
because in the realm of the dead, that scripture finishes off saying, where you're going, um, there is no work, there is no anything. So
Hmm.
get it while you can now, kind of thing. And that's not worldly,
Yeah.
that's biblical. It's
All right.
straight from the Bible,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as we're kind of wrapping up here, would you mind just praying for church leaders, church plants, whatever's on your heart to pray? You mind just closing us out?
Whatever's on my heart, man. I'll just make up some
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, for
Go
sure.
ahead.
Yeah, let's do it. Lord, thank you for just a cool opportunity we have these days that, I
Yeah.
mean, man, you didn't even have back when you walked the planet, that we just get to communicate same language, but across time zones, man, and just
Thank you, Lord.
through screens. And so we have amazing tools to connect with amazing people doing amazing things in different parts of the world, unique expressions, but all under the same, banner to speak life, love, and hope into people. So we're grateful for what you called us to, and we're grateful for these
Yes.
connections, Lord. I pray that you would just provide clarity to the people out there stepping into a calling of church leadership. We know that leadership is influence, and that can happen in so many different ways and in all industries, Lord, but specifically the people that are leading churches and giving them of themselves in a substantial way, in a unique way, in an uncommon way. Give them energy, give them a unique perspective on their success. Help redefine their success and help them
Yeah.
understand where they're moving and where they're making an impact, and also where they're not. Lord, make them better stewards. Give them a unique understanding. Kind of give them the eyes that you have on what they're doing, rather than what they can only perceive with their human eyes. So, but give them energy. Provide them back with resource,
Yeah.
and maybe even just go back to that initial, like, remember who they were when they were called. Remember,
Yeah.
why did they get started? So provide them
Yeah.
again that simple memory of what led to that first step. And so we're grateful again for the opportunity for to come alongside church leaders and to serve them, to encourage them, and to teach them. Sometimes just listen. And we
Yeah.
wait with eager expectation what you'll do with this prayer and many others like it around the world that go up every day, because we know that you're not done and you're moving as much now as ever before.
Yeah.
And again, we're grateful to see it. So put us to work. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.